In 2002, Scott Peterson misrepresented his marital status to a woman named Amber Fry, claiming he was unmarried while still actively involved in a romantic relationship with his wife, Laci Peterson. The trajectory of their lives shattered on Christmas Eve that year when a visibly pregnant Laci, 8 months along, disappeared from a tranquil Modesto street. Inside their home, a nursery stood ready for the expected child, even as her husband asserted he had been fishing 90 miles away. The legal proceedings that followed placed Scott on death row and cast him as the most reviled spouse in American memory. Yet a single judicial ruling in April 2026 has pried the case open once more. Emerging medical evidence fundamentally disrupts the prosecution's original sequence of events. Should this evidence prove credible, a matter the nation considered closed may never have reached a genuine resolution. This development forces two pressing inquiries: what actually transpired on December 24th, and might the jury have condemned an innocent individual? Laci Denise Rocha Peterson entered the world on May 4, 1975, in Modesto, California. Outwardly, her existence followed a steady, promising course. She received a bachelor's degree in ornamental horticulture from California Polytechnic State University in San Luis Obispo in 1997. On August 9th of that same year, she wed Scott Lee Peterson, a fellow Cal Poly student she had first met in 1994. Still youthful and constructing a shared future, the pair briefly operated a sports bar in San Luis Obispo before relocating to Modesto in 2000. By December 2002, they lived at 523 Covina Avenue, an undistinguished single-family dwelling in a hushed neighborhood. Inside, however, everything signaled a fresh start. Laci was 8 months pregnant, and the nursery for their intended son, Connor, was already arranged. Christmas Eve then arrived, altering everything. Around 5:15 that evening, Scott Peterson telephoned Laci's mother, Sharon Rocha, inquiring whether Laci had arrived for dinner. She had not. Shortly thereafter, he notified authorities that his wife was missing. The Modesto Police Department responded within 60 minutes, and what initiated as a routine missing person call swiftly escalated into a considerably larger endeavor. By 11:10 p.m. that very night, a comprehensive search operation was underway. Within mere days, the story had traveled far past Modesto. By December 27th, Laci Peterson's disappearance had become nationwide news. As the case expanded, prosecutors formulated a theory straightforward in design, but almost wholly circumstantial. Its core rested on Scott Peterson's extramarital relationship with Amber Fry, a massage therapist from Fresno. He had begun seeing her on November 20th, 2002, merely a month before Laci vanished, and had told Fry he was unmarried. Then a disturbing detail emerged. On December 9th, 15 days prior to Laci's disappearance, Scott informed Amber that he had recently become a widower and that this would be his first holiday season without his wife. Prosecutors argued this was not sorrow but premeditation. In their construction of events, Scott murdered Laci on the night of December 23rd or the early hours of December 24th, placed her body into the bed of his truck, drove roughly 90 miles westward to the Berkeley Marina, moved her onto his 14-foot aluminum fishing boat, and disposed of her in San Francisco Bay using concrete anchors fabricated in his Modesto warehouse. The trial did not commence immediately, but when it did, it became one of the most closely watched criminal trials of its period. Due to intense publicity in Stanislaus County, the case was relocated to San Mateo County Superior Court. The trial started on June 1, 2004, and extended for nearly 6 months. Ultimately, on November 12, 2004, the jury found Scott Peterson guilty of first-degree murder for Laci and second-degree murder for Connor. The penalty phase followed, and on March 16, 2005, that same jury recommended capital punishment. Judge Alfred DeLucci formally imposed the death sentence that day. In the early hours of March 17, 2005, Scott Peterson was transferred to San Quentin State Prison. Some press accounts noted he had been too agitated to rest the night before the transfer, a minor detail that only enhanced the strange and unsettling public image already formed around him for the subsequent 15 years that defined the contours of his life. On California's death row, he became inmate V70-200, reading, writing correspondence, and maintaining contact with his appellate attorneys while the death sentence lingered, though it was never enforced. California was not executing anyone during those years. The last execution in the state had been Clarence Ray Allen in 2006, after which legal challenges effectively paralyzed the system. Then, in March 2019, Governor Gavin Newsom issued a moratorium on all executions in California, sparing the approximately 737 inmates on death row at that time, including Scott Peterson. Even so, the first genuine legal shift in Peterson's case did not arrive until August 24, 2020, when the California Supreme Court unanimously set aside his death sentence. The ruling did not erase the murder convictions, a critical distinction. The court determined that the trial judge had improperly dismissed potential jurors who personally opposed capital punishment, even though those jurors had affirmed they could still follow the law and impose a death sentence if the evidence warranted it. In the court's assessment, that error had unfairly biased the jury pool against the defendant. Thus, the conviction remained, but the penalty was removed. This left the state with two difficult alternatives. Prosecutors could retry the penalty phase, which would require reassembling witnesses, experts, and legal arguments more than 17 years after Laci's death, or they could abandon the death sentence and accept life imprisonment without parole. Before that choice fully resolved, another issue emerged. On October 14, 2020, the California Supreme Court issued a separate order to show cause on Peterson's habeas claim that juror number 7 had committed prejudicial misconduct during the original trial, specifically that she failed to disclose her involvement in past legal matters, including having been a crime victim. That order opened the door to a lengthy evidentiary hearing in 2022 focused on jury misconduct, though ultimately it did not grant Peterson the new trial he sought. Then, on December 8, 2021, the Stanislaus County District Attorney's Office formally decided not to pursue a new penalty phase trial. In exchange, Peterson was resentenced to life in prison without possibility of parole. The resentencing was carried out by Judge Christine Masello. Peterson, then 49, declined to speak in court. Laci's mother, Sharon Rocha, did. Afterward, Peterson was moved from San Quentin to Mule Creek State Prison in Ione, California, where he has remained ever since. Yet the case did not cease moving. In 2022, following the evidentiary hearing, Judge Masello denied Peterson's separate motion for a new trial based on the juror misconduct issue. He appealed, and that appeal remained pending in the California Supreme Court as of spring 2026. So, while the death sentence was gone, the deeper contest over the conviction itself was still very much active. Then came a development that altered the case's direction more than any other in years. In late 2023 and early 2024, the Los Angeles Innocence Project, LAIP, intervened. Before that, Peterson had already begun attempting to advance on his own. On April 19, 2023, after losing the ability to pay for private appellate lawyers, he filed a handwritten habeas petition on his own behalf, raising 6 issues, including new reports from witnesses who claimed to have heard a confession and accounts suggesting Laci may have been seen alive on December 24, 2002, near a burglary that occurred across the street from the Peterson home. In August 2023, attorney Corinne Felido was appointed to represent him. Then, in November 2023, the Los Angeles Innocence Project formally took over as his counsel of record. Another portion of the petition focuses on something even stranger. On Christmas Day, December 25, 2002, a burned-out Ford Econoline van from the 1980s was found in the Peterson's Modesto neighborhood. According to the LAIP petition and earlier reporting, a blood-stained mattress was inside. The van was reportedly examined by Modesto police soon after it was discovered, but the defense argues that it was destroyed before proper forensic testing could be completed. They also say the original police files contain no record of DNA testing on that mattress. This matters because the defense views the van as a possible crime scene that was never fully investigated. In their view, destroying it may have meant destroying evidence that could have assisted Scott Peterson. They frame this as a Brady issue, along with related California rules requiring the state to preserve evidence favorable to the defense. The state again rejects that prosecutors maintain that the van had nothing to do with Laci's disappearance, that the blood on the mattress was tested at the time and did not match Laci's DNA, and that the van was disposed of under ordinary evidence handling procedures. Then there is the duct tape, the sole item Judge Hill permitted for DNA testing in May 2024. That testing was carried out during 2024 and 2025, but as of early May 2026, the results have still not been made public. The LAIP petition does not appear to rely on those results as a central part of its habeas claim, which has led many observers to suspect the results were either inconclusive or did not assist the defense as hoped. The state has not publicly commented on them either. The petition also leans on witnesses who assert Laci Peterson was alive on December 24, 2002, after the point when the prosecution claimed she had already been killed. These sightings came from people in the Covina Avenue neighborhood and others in the wider Modesto area. The most important account comes from Tom and Diane Harshman, a married couple who said they were driving through the Petersons' neighborhood that morning and saw a woman matching Laci's description walking a golden retriever near Loma Park. According to LAIP, the Harshmans gave that statement to police in 2003, but it was never properly integrated into the case file and was not disclosed to the defense before trial. The defense says that sighting, combined with several others, places Laci alive in her own neighborhood at a time when the prosecution insisted she was already dead. The state says those sightings cannot be trusted. Prosecutors argue the accounts conflict with one another, the times do not align, and some witnesses later change their stories. Judge Hill did not weigh in on who was more believable. In her April 2026 ruling, she remained focused on procedure, holding that the witness statements had been substantially available to the defense at the time of trial. In her view, the fact that they were not used then did not create a basis for habeas relief in 2025 or 2026. This brings everything to the real barrier in this case, and it is not just factual, but procedural. Under California Penal Code Section 1473 and the California Supreme Court's decision in Re Robbins 2008, someone filing a later habeas petition after direct appeal and a previous habeas effort must show that the new claims truly rest on evidence that could not have been discovered earlier with reasonable diligence. By any legal standard, that is a brutally demanding rule. LAIP tried to meet that standard by arguing that the fetal biometry reanalysis was genuinely new because the reference data used by its Brigham and Women's Hospital expert was published only after Scott Peterson's 2004 trial. The state pushed back, saying that fetal biometry itself was already known at the time, and that any failure by the defense to challenge Dr. DeVore's analysis more aggressively back then does not justify relief more than 2 decades later. Judge Hill sided with the state on every procedural point. In her ruling issued late on Monday, April 28, 2026, she did not reach the merits of any of the 14 substantive claims in the LAIP petition. Instead, she found that all 14 were either previously available, previously raised, or not meaningfully different from arguments already made in Peterson's 2015 habeas petition filed by his former appellate attorney, Larry Gibbs. In legal terms, it was a procedural denial. That did not stop LAIP from taking the same claims to higher courts, but it did stop those claims from being heard on their merits at the trial court level. The state's response to all of this is straightforward. Prosecutors say those statements are self-serving and fit the same pattern of denial Peterson has maintained since the beginning. For all the attention now going to new theories, the original trial record still contains a case that has not been erased. Scott Peterson was having an active affair with Amber Frey when his wife disappeared. 15 days before Laci vanished, he told Frey he had recently lost his wife. In early December 2002, he bought a fishing boat that he had not discussed with Laci or with his family. On the morning of December 24, 2002, he drove his pregnant wife's car to the Berkeley Marina and went on a fishing trip in cold December weather without the proper gear for any fish likely to be caught there at that time of year. When Modesto police first spoke to him on the night of December 24th, he did not mention that he had gone to the Berkeley Marina. Then in April 2003, when Laci's body and the body of her unborn son surfaced within a few miles of that same marina, He later attempted to flee to Mexico, carrying $15,000 in cash and using his brother's identification. The defense has always answered that point by saying those facts may describe a liar, an adulterer, or a frightened husband, but not necessarily a killer. LAIP takes that same idea further. Its position is that in 2026, circumstantial evidence of infidelity and apparent flight is not enough to sustain confidence in a murder conviction beyond a reasonable doubt if the scientific timeline for the deaths has been seriously weakened. But the jury in 2004 saw it differently. After a 6-month trial and about 7 days of deliberation, that jury concluded that the full weight of the circumstantial evidence proved Scott Peterson guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. That verdict has now stood for 22 years. The California Supreme Court upheld the conviction, even though it threw out the death sentence in 2020 for procedural reasons. The United States Supreme Court declined to hear Peterson's federal appeal in October 2018. And as of May 2026, whatever new arguments continue to surface, the conviction itself still stands intact.